The galaxy had never seen a war like this. Earth's colonies were scattered across the stars, vulnerable and defenseless. The Zardoc Empire, a ruthless alien race, had arrived with a fleet so large it seemed to cover the skies of every human-held planet. One by one, Earth's colonies fell. Ships were destroyed, cities were burned, and the survivors scattered, hiding where they could. The Earth was all that was left, the final stronghold of humanity. Captain Ethan Harper stood on the command bridge of the Vanguard, Earth's last warship, watching the stars outside the window. His once strong fleet was now a shadow of its former self. Resources were dwindling, and morale had dropped to an all-time low. The Zardoc Empire was closing in, and with every passing day, the chances of survival grew slimmer. Harper had already watched his friends, his fellow officers, and his soldiers fall one by one. Every day the enemy was at their heels, and no reinforcements came. There was no hope left. His fingers hovered over the console, the final option blinking in front of him. It was a long shot, a desperate measure. But if it worked, it might be humanity's only chance to survive. "Captain, what are we going to do?" Lieutenant Ava Reynolds, his second-in-command, asked. She had been with him through every battle. She had seen the horrors, lost countless crew members, and yet she still believed in their mission. But even she knew that time was running out. "We're going to do the only thing we can do," Harper said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We send a call for help." "A call for help?" Reynolds asked, her brow furrowing. "Who will answer?"
The rest of the galaxy is fighting their own wars."
"There's no one left to help us." Harper turned to face her, his jaw tight. "There's one species we haven't contacted yet. One species the entire galaxy fears. The Deathborn." Reynolds blinked in shock. The Deathborn were legends. No one had seen them for centuries, but their name sent a chill down the spine of every living being in the galaxy. They were known for their brutality and unmatched power. Stories spoke of their warships that could tear through entire fleets. With ease, their warriors who never lost a battle, their leaders who demanded absolute loyalty. Some said they were more myth than reality, a weapon of fear used to control the galaxy. But Captain Harper wasn't one to believe in myths. "You're crazy," Reynolds said, shaking her head. "The Deathborn don't care about us. They don't. Fight for others." "They might not," Harper agreed, "but they might fight for power, for control. And right now, we need a chance to survive." Reynolds looked out the window, her mind racing. The Zardoc fleet had already surrounded Earth, cutting off any escape routes. There was no other way out. If they didn't do something, humanity was finished. "Do you think they'll answer?" she asked quietly. "I don't know," Harper replied, his voice heavy with uncertainty. "But we have to try." Harper walked over to the console and hesitated for a moment. His finger pressed the button, sending a transmission out into the vast emptiness of space. The signal was directed to the deepest, darkest part of the galaxy, where no one ever went. It's the Deathburn's last known location. "This is Captain Ethan Harper of the United Earth Defense Fleet," he began, his voice strong but tinged with desperation. "We are out of time. Our forces are being destroyed and our people are dying. We call upon the Deathborn for aid. If you are listening, we ask for your help. The Zardoc Empire has wiped out everything we hold dear. Please, we have nothing left. We send this call in the hopes that you will hear it. Humanity's survival depends on you." He paused, then added, "If you wish to see humanity fall, do nothing. If you wish to see us rise, then come." He ended the transmission and sat back in his chair, staring at the blank screen. For a long moment, no one spoke. The crew on the bridge could feel the tension in the air. They had just sent a message to the most dangerous species in the galaxy. They had no idea what would happen next. "Well, we've done all we can," Reynolds said finally, breaking the silence. "Now we wait." But as the hours dragged on, there was no response. The Zardoc Empire was still closing in, their ships growing larger in the sky. The Vanguard was their last line of defense. Harper knew they could only hold out for so long. The Zardoc fleet had already sent probes into Earth's atmosphere. A full-scale invasion was imminent. What if they don't respond? Reynolds asked, her voice full of doubt. Harper shook his head. We'll fight until the end. We're not giving up. Another hour passed, then another. The crew was on edge. Everyone waited for something, anything. But there was still no sign of the Deathborn. They had all hoped for a miracle, but hope was a fragile thing in these times. And as the Zardoc fleet moved closer, the pressure mounted. If the Deathborn didn't come, Earth would fall. Just as it seemed like all was lost, the communication panel blinked. A signal, a return transmission. Harper's heart skipped a beat. He rushed to the console, and Reynolds moved quickly beside him. With trembling hands, Harper pressed the button to receive the message. The screen flickered, and a dark figure appeared. His face was masked, his eyes glowing faintly in the dim light of the ship. His voice was like thunder, deep and commanding. The words he spoke were simple, but they held weight. "We have heard your call," the figure said, his voice echoing with an ancient power. "We are the Deathborn. We fight for one thing, domination. Prove you are worthy of our aid. Do not waste our time." Harper's heart raced. The Deathborn had answered, but at what cost? The transmission ended, leaving the crew in stunned silence. "Now, we wait for our trial," Harper muttered, his mind racing with the possibilities. The galaxy's most feared species had arrived. But would they truly help? Or would this be humanity's last stand? The message had been sent. Captain Ethan Harper and his crew stood in silence, waiting for something, anything. The minutes felt like hours as the Vanguard drifted in the emptiness of space, surrounded by the ever-approaching Zardoc fleet. Despite all the pain, the suffering, and the destruction they had endured, the crew couldn't help but feel a strange sense of anticipation. They had just contacted the Deathborn, the most feared species in the galaxy, and now they were left to wait. Harper stood at the front of the bridge, fixed on the stars outside. His mind raced with thoughts of what might happen next. The Deathborn were not known for mercy, nor were they known for helping anyone. They were creatures of power, driven by a thirst for domination. But in this moment of desperation, humanity had no choice but to reach out to them. "Do you think they'll actually help us?" Lieutenant Ava Reynolds asked, her voice filled with uncertainty. She stood beside Harper, staring at the same view outside the ship's windows. "We don't even know if they still exist. What if they don't respond?" Harper turned to face her. "They responded, Ava. That's all we can ask for. Now we have to be ready for whatever comes next." "But what does it mean?" she asked. "They said we had to prove we were worthy. What does that even mean? How are we supposed to prove ourselves to the most dangerous species in the galaxy?" Before Harper could answer, the communication panel blinked. A soft beep echoed through the bridge, and everyone froze. The crew turned to look at the console. This was a return transmission. They had no idea what to expect, but they had waited long enough. Harper rushed to the panel, his heart racing. He pressed the button to receive the message, and the screen flickered to life. For a moment, all they could see was darkness. Then the figure appeared. It was large, imposing, and covered in dark armor. The Deathborn leader, Raxer, stood before them, his glowing eyes piercing the darkness. "We have heard your call," his voice echoed through the room, low and terrifying. "We are the Deathborn. We answer only to power. Prove you are worthy of our help, or we will leave you to your fate." The crew of the Vanguard stared at the screen, struck silent by the sheer force of Raxer's presence. It was a figure of terror, the stuff of legends. But now, here he was, in front of them. This was their only chance, the only opportunity they had to survive. "We are prepared," Harper said, his voice steady despite the fear running through him. "We've done everything we can to survive. We're still fighting, and we need your help. If you can help us destroy the Zardoc Empire, we will prove ourselves worthy." Raxer's eyes narrowed as if studying Harper. "Prove yourselves," he repeated. "There's no honor in weakness. If you are to survive, you must fight like we do. Only then will you earn our favor." The transmission ended abruptly, and the screen went black. The silence that followed was deafening. The crew of the Vanguard exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of what they had just agreed to. prove themselves? How could they possibly do that? They're not going to help us without a reason, Lieutenant Reynolds said softly, her voice trembling. We're going to have to fight for our survival. But against the Deathborn, How? Harper ran a hand through his hair, frustration and fear building inside him. We don't have a choice. If we don't do what they want, if we don't prove we're worth their help, we're finished. Minutes turned to hours as the crew prepared. For whatever the Deathborn would throw at them, the Zardoc fleet was getting closer by the second. Harper knew they had no time to waste. They needed to act, and they needed to act fast. Captain Reynolds said, her voice filled with urgency. We've got incoming Zardoc ships. They're just outside the planet's orbit. If we don't act now, they'll land before we even get the chance to do anything. Harper nodded. We fight. We hold them off. We prove to the Deathborn that we deserve their help. The Vanguard's engines roared to life as it moved toward the Zardoc fleet, ready to meet them head-on. Harper took his seat at the command console, every nerve in his body on edge. He had faced many battles before, but this was different. The stakes were higher than ever. This time, the fate of humanity rested on his shoulders. As the Zardoc ships came into view, Harper could feel the tension rise on the bridge. The Vanguard's weapon systems came online, and the crew prepared for battle. Harper's mind raced, thinking of every possible way to fight back against the overwhelming force of the Zardoc fleet. He knew they couldn't win on their own. They needed the Deathborn, and they needed them now. The first shots from the Zardoc ships lit up the dark. Void of space, a dazzling display of destruction. The Vanguard returned fire, its cannons roaring as the crew fought to hold their ground. The Zardoc fleet was massive, and every ship that fell was replaced by more. The battle was relentless. We can't keep this up, Lieutenant Reynolds said, her voice strained. We need help. Now. Harper gritted his teeth. He knew they couldn't last much longer. And then, just as the Zardoc fleet pressed in closer, the unthinkable happened. A massive warship appeared from the depths of space, emerging from the darkness like a shadow. The ship was black, its design sleek and deadly. The Deathborn had arrived. Finally, Harper whispered, his heart racing with relief. The Vanguard's sensors detected the new ship's weapon systems coming online, a sign that the Deathborn were ready to fight. The Zardoc fleet turned its attention to the new threat, and for the first time in days, humanity had a glimmer of hope. Raxor's warship fired its weapons, ripping through the Zardoc ships with terrifying efficiency. The Zardoc forces were taken by surprise, their ships crumbling under the onslaught. The Deathborn didn't hold back. They fought like machines, destroying everything in their path. Harper watched as the tide of the battle began to turn. The Deathborn had arrived, and they were as dangerous as the legends had promised. The Zardoc fleet began to retreat, unable to withstand the combined might of the Vanguard and the Deathborn. But even as the enemy ships fled, Harper knew that this was just the beginning. The Deathborn had helped them, but at what cost? What would the price of their aid be? As the Vanguard stood victorious, Harper looked at Raxor's ship in the distance. He had no idea what the Deathborn would want in return, but one thing was clear: humanity's fight for survival had just begun. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. The Zardoc Empire, forced into retreat by the overwhelming force of the Deathborn, was still out there, regrouping. And now, Earth's last hope was tied to a species as feared as they were: mysterious. The Deathborn had helped them, but the price of that help was unknown. Captain Ethan Harper stood at the command console of the Vanguard, staring at the massive warship that had just pulled away from the Zardoc fleet. It was an imposing sight, sleek and black, a symbol of power. The Deathborn had arrived, but he could feel the weight of the unspoken truth. They had not come out of the goodness of their hearts. The question was, what would they want in return? They've saved us for now, but we can't be sure what they expect from us next, Lieutenant Ava Reynolds said, her voice tight with unease. She had seen the ruthless efficiency of the Deathborn in battle, but she wasn't sure if humanity could survive what they might demand in exchange. Harper nodded, his face grim. I know, but right now we have no choice. If we don't work with them, we'll never defeat the Zardoc. We need their strength. The Vanguard had only been able to hold off the Zardoc long enough for the Deathborn warship to arrive, but it was clear that the Zardoc were only taking a step back. They would come back. And when they did, Earth needed a more permanent solution. As if on cue, a transmission came through. The voice on the other end was cold, distant, and filled with power. It was Raxer, the leader of the Deathborn. Captain Harper. Raxer's voice boomed across the bridge, filling every corner of the Vanguard. You have shown that you are willing to fight, but that is not enough. If you want my aid, you must prove that your species is worthy of survival. The crew on the bridge tensed at his words. Harper stood tall, trying not to show the fear gnawing at him. He knew the Deathborn wouldn't make it easy, but this was humanity's last chance. He needed to stay calm. What do you want from us? Harper asked, his voice steady. Raxer's glowing eyes flickered on the screen, almost as if he was studying Harper. You must face the trials of the Deathborn. Only those who survive our tests may earn our allegiance. If you fail, your species will be wiped from existence. Harper swallowed hard. It was what he had feared. The Deathborn didn't do things out of kindness. They demanded strength, power, and unwavering loyalty. But he had no choice. Humanity had no other allies. This was it. How do we begin? Harper asked, his jaw set firmly. Raxer's voice was colder than ever. Prepare your best warriors. We will come to you. The transmission ended, and the bridge fell silent. Harper could feel the weight of the moment pressing on him. His crew, his soldiers, his people, they were all depending on him to make the right choice. But was it even the right choice? Could they survive the Deathburn's trials? We don't have much time, Reynolds said, breaking the silence. If we're going to face whatever Raxer has in store for us, we need to prepare. But can we really pass these trials? I've heard the stories. The Deathborn don't tolerate weakness. Harper turned to her, his face resolute. We don't have a choice. We'll train the best we have. Our soldiers, our fleet. We'll make sure they're ready for whatever the Deathborn throw at us. But even as Harper spoke with confidence, he knew that this would not be easy. The Deathborn were legends, and their trials were not for the faint of heart. They had destroyed entire civilizations before, and if humanity failed, it would be no different. As the hours passed, the crew prepared. Harper watched as his officers and soldiers gathered in the training rooms, preparing for the unknown. The Deathborn were coming, and no one knew exactly what to expect. But the air was thick with tension. Everyone knew this would be their hardest test yet. The first trial began the next morning. A message from Raxer arrived, instructing them to meet at a designated location on Earth's surface. It was a barren, desolate landscape, chosen for its isolation. The Deathborn ship arrived with a deafening roar, its dark silhouette casting a shadow over the land. A small group of Deathborn warriors emerged from the ship, their armor glinting in the sunlight. Their presence alone sent a wave of fear through the human soldiers who had been chosen for the trial. We are the Deathborn, Raxar announced, his voice like thunder. You will fight. You will prove your strength. Only the strongest will. Survive, fail, and you will be eliminated. Harper stood at the edge of the battlefield, watching as his soldiers lined up. The Deathborn were intimidating, but Harper couldn't show any sign of doubt. He had to lead them, no matter what. The trial was brutal. Deathborn tested the humans in every way imaginable: strength, endurance, strategy, and survival. The warriors faced off in one-on-one combat with the Deathborn soldiers, their weapons clashing with an intensity that made the ground shake. The humans fought with all their might, but the Deathborn were relentless. Pushing them to their limits, hours passed, and one by one the humans were tested. Some were injured, others were forced to surrender, and a few were even eliminated from the trials. But those who survived were stronger, more determined, and ready for whatever came next. By the end of the day, only a handful of humans remained standing. Harper watched as they wiped the sweat and blood from their faces. They had proven themselves. But he knew the hardest part was yet to come. As the sun set, Raxer approached. His voice was as cold as ever. "You have shown that your species has strength, but strength is not enough. The final test will come tomorrow. You must prove your loyalty. Only then will you be worthy of our help." Harper's heart sank. Loyalty. What did that mean? What more could the Deathborn ask for? "We'll be ready," Harper said, though doubt crept into his mind. "We have no other choice." Deathborn had given them a chance. But Harper couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of an even darker path. The sun rose over Earth's barren landscape the following morning, casting long shadows across the ground. The air was thick with tension. Captain Ethan Harper stood among his remaining warriors, the survivors of yesterday's brutal trials. They had fought hard, endured pain, and faced the unforgiving tests of the Deathborn. But the final trial awaited, and Harper could feel the weight of it pressing down on him. His soldiers, bruised and battered, stood at attention, their faces a mix of exhaustion and determination. They had come through the first trials, but they all knew that the real test had yet to come. The Deathborn had warned them that only the strongest would survive, but no one truly understood what that meant. Harper himself couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was still to come. The Deathborn will not be kind today. Lieutenant Ava Reynolds said quietly as she stood beside Harper, her eyes scanning the horizon. "Whatever this final test is, I don't think we're ready, but we have to try." Harper nodded, his jaw set. "We've come this far. We can't stop now. We have to prove that humanity is worth saving." As if on cue, the massive silhouette of the Deathborn ship appeared in the sky, its engines glowing as it descended toward Earth. The warriors stood tall, trying to hide the fear that still lingered in their eyes. They had faced the Deathburns, soldiers, but today they would face something far worse. Harper could feel it. The ship touched down with a thunderous roar, its landing sending a shockwave through the ground. The Deathborn warriors disembarked, their black armor gleaming in the harsh sunlight. Raxer, their leader, was among them, his cold, calculating eyes fixed on Harper. "You have shown strength," Raxer's voice boomed, echoing across the battlefield. "But strength alone is not enough. You must show loyalty. Prove that you are worthy of our help, and we will fight alongside you. Fail, and your species will be wiped from existence." Harper's heart raced. Loyalty? What did that mean? What more did the Deathborn want from them? But there was no time for questions. The final test had begun. Raxer motioned to the side, and a group of Deathborn soldiers brought forward a large metal cage. Inside the cage was a creature unlike anything the humans had ever seen. It was a massive, towering beast, covered in scales, with eyes glowing a fierce, unnatural red. Its claws were sharp enough to tear through metal, and its jaws could crush bone with a single bite. The creature growled, its roar echoing across the battlefield. It was an apex predator, a being of pure destruction. "This is the final test," Raxer announced, his voice cold and emotionless. "You must show loyalty to your species. One of you must face this creature in combat. If you defeat it, you prove your strength and your loyalty. If you fail, you and your species will be erased." The soldiers exchanged nervous glances. No one spoke, but the fear was palpable. The creature in the cage was a living nightmare. Who among them could possibly defeat it? Harper felt his heart sink. He knew what this meant. The Deathborn wanted them to sacrifice one of their own. He didn't care who fought or who died. The strongest would survive. It was a brutal, unforgiving test, and Harper couldn't decide if he was willing to ask one of his soldiers to face such a monster. "Ava," Harper said, turning to his second-in-command. "You've been through more than anyone else here. You've led our forces through the worst of the battles. You're the strongest among us. You should fight." Reynolds shook her head, her eyes hard. "No, Captain. I'm not the one to fight. We need you. You're the leader. You have to be the one to face this." Harper looked at her, his mind racing. He knew she was right, but the thought of facing such a creature or asking anyone to do it felt impossible. But duty called. He had to lead by example. He couldn't let his soldiers face this test alone. "I'll do it," Harper said, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. "If we fail, humanity fails. I won't let that happen." A moment of silence passed before Reynolds spoke again, her voice quieter this time. "Be careful, Captain. You've led us this far, but we don't know what the Deathborn will do after this. They've helped us, but they don't fight for free." Harper gave a nod, though his mind was clouded with doubt. He walked forward, his steps heavy with the weight of the decision he had made. The Deathborn warriors watched silently, their eyes full of cold judgment. The cage holding the creature was opened, and the beast stepped forward, growling low in its throat. It was massive, far larger than anything Harper had ever faced. But he had no choice. He had to fight. The creature lunged at him with terrifying speed, its claws swiping through the air. Harper barely managed to dodge, rolling to the side just in time. The ground shook as the beast's claws slammed into the dirt where he had just stood. Harper's heart pounded in his chest as he scrambled to his feet, his weapon ready. But the creature was relentless, charged again, faster than he could react. The fight was brutal. Harper fought with everything he had, using every ounce of his training and skill to stay alive. He ducked, dodged, and struck whenever he saw an opening. But the creature was powerful, and its strength seemed endless. Every time Harper landed a blow, it barely seemed to affect the beast. It kept coming, its claws slashing at him with deadly precision, but Harper refused to give up. He fought harder, pushing through the pain, determined to survive. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he found his chance. The creature lunged at him one final time, and with all his strength, Harper drove his weapon into its chest. Da 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 da. Beast let out a final, terrible roar before collapsing to the ground. Dead, breathing heavily, Harper stood over the creature's lifeless body, covered in sweat and blood. His body ached, but he had won. The Deathborn warriors were silent as they watched him, their faces unreadable. Raxer stepped forward, his cold eyes locked on Harper. "You have shown strength," Raxer said, his voice thick with approval. "But strength is only part of the test. You have proven your loyalty. You and your species will be spared." Harper's heart swelled with relief, but he knew the battle was far from over. The Deathborn had helped them, but what did it mean for the future? One thing was certain. Humanity had survived for now. The Deathborn's presence had changed everything. With their help, the Zardoc Empire had been pushed back, but Harper knew it was only a matter of time before the enemy regrouped. The Deathborn had proven their strength in the trials, but now humanity had to prove its worth in the war. Captain Ethan Harper stood on the bridge of the Vanguard, watching as the last of the Zardoc ships fled the battlefield. The battle was over, but the war was far from won. "We've won this battle, but not the war," Harper said, turning to face his crew. "The Zardoc will come again, and when they do, we need to be ready. We need to show them that we're not just survivors, we're fighters." Lieutenant Ava Reynolds nodded, her expression serious. "The Deathborn helped us, but we still have to face the rest of the galaxy. The Zardoc won't forget this, and I don't trust that the Deathborn are fighting for free." Harper glanced at the view screen, where the Deathborn ship lingered in the distance. It was an intimidating sight, a dark shadow in the vastness of space. The Deathborn had kept their word, helping humanity destroy the Zardoc fleet. But Harper couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to their help than just a shared enemy. "We've made a deal with the devil," Reynolds added, her voice low. "They helped us, but what do they want in return? We need to be ready for whatever they ask." Harper's mind was heavy with the same question. The Deathborn didn't fight for free. There had to be a price. But he didn't have the luxury of worrying about it right now. The Zardoc would be back, and they needed a plan. "We'll deal with that later," Harper said, his voice steady. "For now, we focus on the war. The Deathborn have given us a chance, and we'll take it." The crew nodded, their resolve hardening. The battle had been hard, but it was nothing compared to what was to come. The Zardoc Empire had been defeated, but the galaxy was still full of enemies. And with the Deathborn at their side, humanity had a chance to turn the tide. "Captain," receiving a message, one of the crew members said, breaking the silence. The crew turned to the console, and the message appeared on the screen. It was from Raxer, the leader of the Deathborn. "You have fought well," Raxer's voice echoed through the room. "But this is only the beginning. Zardoc Empire will regroup, and others will come. You will need more than just strength to win this war. You will need loyalty. You'll need the Deathborn." Harper exchanged a glance with Reynolds. Knew what Raxer was implying. The Deathborn weren't just offering their help out of kindness. They expected something in return, something that could change the course of the war. "We will fight with you," Rax continued. "But you must prove that you can control the power we've given you. We are not your allies in the traditional sense. We fight for ourselves, and we expect the same from you. Prove that you are worthy of our strength." The transmission ended, leaving Harper and his crew in stunned silence. The Deathborn had helped them, but their price had just become clear. They didn't fight for honor or for glory. They fought for power. And if humanity was going to survive, they had to prove that they could wield that power. "We don't have much time," Reynolds said, breaking the silence. "The Deathborn have made it clear that we have to show them that we can control the power they've given us. If we don't, they'll walk away, and we'll be left to fight on our own." Harper stood tall, his mind already working through the possibilities. He had to find a way to prove humanity's worth, to show the Deathborn that they were not just pawns in a game, but equals. He wasn't sure how to do it, but he knew one thing: humanity's survival depended on it. "We'll prove ourselves," Harper said, his voice full of determination. "We've come too far to back down now. Zardoc won't stop coming, and neither will we." The crew nodded, their faces set with grim resolve. They had been pushed to the brink, and now they had to push back. The Deathborn had given them a chance, but it was up to them to take it. The vanguard set course for the nearest Zardoc stronghold, ready to make a final stand. Harper knew it wouldn't be easy. Zardoc were ruthless, and the Deathborn were unpredictable. Yet they had one advantage: they had nothing left to lose. And with the power of the Deathborn on their side, humanity had a fighting chance. The journey to the Zardoc stronghold was long and tense. The crew worked together, preparing their weapons, their tactics, and their minds for the battle ahead. There was no room for doubt. The Zardoc had taken so much from them, and it was time to take it back. As they approached the Zardoc stronghold, the vanguard sensors picked up the first signs of enemy ships. The Zardoc had already begun to regroup. They were ready for the fight, but they didn't know what was coming. Harper stood on the bridge, watching as the enemy ships came into view. He knew that this battle would be different. This time, they weren't fighting alone. The Deathborn were with them, and with their power, humanity had a chance to turn the tide of the war. "Prepare for battle," Harper ordered, his voice calm but filled with urgency. "We fight together, and we fight to win." The vanguard moved into position, its weapons charged and ready. The crew braced themselves for what was to come. This would be the battle that determined humanity's future. The tension on the vanguard was almost unbearable as they approached the Zardoc stronghold. Captain Ethan Harper stood on the bridge, staring at the vast expanse of space where enemy ships awaited. His mind was focused on one thing: victory. The Zardoc had ravaged Earth and destroyed humanity's colonies, but now it was their turn. The time had come to put everything on the line. "We have one chance to end this," Harper said, his voice steady but filled with urgency. "The Deathborn are with us, but they're not here to fight for us forever. We must prove that we can stand on our own. This is the moment we make our final stand." Lieutenant Ava Reynolds stood beside him, her face a mask of determination. "We've lost so much already. We can't lose anymore. If we fail here, humanity's future is over. We fight with everything we have." Harper nodded. He knew that Reynolds was right. The Zardoc fleet was vast, and the Deathborn had helped them in ways no one could have imagined. Aid was not guaranteed forever. They had to show their worth, prove that humanity could be just as dangerous, just as powerful as the greatest species in the galaxy. As the vanguard moved closer to the Zardoc stronghold, The crew prepared for the worst. The weapons were loaded, and the battle stations were manned. It was going to be a brutal fight, one that would push them all to their limits. Harper was ready. "Captain, the Zardoc fleet is hailing us," communications officer said, breaking the silence. Harper turned to face the screen. The Zardoc leader, a tall reptilian creature with glowing red eyes, appeared on the monitor. His voice was cold, filled with disdain. "Humans," the Zardoc leader hissed. "You think you can challenge us? You're nothing more than ants too? Be crushed under our boots. Your species is weak, and no amount of help from the Deathborn will save you." Harper's jaw tightened. "We're not weak, Zardoc. We've fought and survived when others would have fallen. We've lost everything, but we still stand. We're ready for you." The Zardoc leader's eyes narrowed. "You will regret your defiance. The full force of the Zardoc Empire will destroy you. There is no escape." Before Harper could respond, the transmission ended, and the battle began. The Vanguard fired its weapons first, a barrage of energy blasts that lit up the darkness of space. The Zardoc fleet responded with equal force, and the two sides clashed in a violent explosion of light and sound. Ships tore through space, their weapons firing, their engines roaring as they fought for survival. Harper stood at the command console, his hands steady as he gave orders to the crew. "Keep them off us, don't let them get close." The Vanguard shook as enemy fire hit its shields, but the ship held strong. Harper knew they couldn't take many more hits, but they had to keep fighting. The Deathborn warship, dark and menacing, moved in alongside them, its weapons tearing through Zardoc ships like paper. The Deathborn were true to their word. They had come to fight, and they were showing no mercy. "Captain, we've got incoming fire from the Zardoc command ship." One of the officers called out, "They're targeting our weak points." Harper's eyes flicked to the screen. The Zardoc command ship, massive and heavily armed, was bearing down on them. Its weapons were locked on the Vanguard, and they were getting closer. The crew worked quickly, but the enemy's firepower was overwhelming. "We need to take out that command ship," Reynolds said, her voice urgent. "If we don't, we won't survive this." Harper nodded. He knew what had to be done. "All ships, focus fire on the Zardoc command ship. Need to break their command before they can regroup." The crew worked together, coordinating their attacks, focusing all their energy on the command ship. The Deathburn's warship led the charge, firing its massive cannons at the Zardoc flagship. The Vanguard joined in, and together they unleashed a wave of firepower that shook the battlefield. It wasn't long before the Zardoc command ship started to show signs of damage. Its shields flickered, and the weapon's fire slowed. The Zardoc fleet's command was faltering. But just as it seemed like victory was within reach, a new threat appeared. A fleet of Zardoc reinforcements emerged from hyperspace, their ships massive and well-equipped. The odds were now against them again, and Harper's stomach churned with the realization that this might be their final test. "Captain, we've got more enemies incoming," the sensors officer reported. "The Zardoc reinforcements are here?" Harper's mind raced. They couldn't hold off two fleets. He glanced at the Deathborn ship, which was still holding its ground. The Deathborn had already proven their strength, but even they couldn't fight an entire fleet on their own. Humanity needed to act fast. "We need to make a final push," Harper said, his voice filled with determination. "We can't let them win. All ships, focus everything on the reinforcements. Give it everything we've got." The crew responded without hesitation, launching everything they had at the incoming Zardoc ships. The Vanguard's engines roared as it charged toward the reinforcements, its weapons firing in all directions. The Deathborn's warship followed close behind, its dark form cutting through space like a predator on the hunt. For hours, the battle raged on, with neither side giving an inch. Ships were destroyed, debris scattered across the battlefield. But humanity's forces fought with everything they had. They were not going to lose this war. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the Zardoc fleet began to retreat. The reinforcements had been destroyed, and the Zardoc command ship was no more. The Vanguard and the Deathburn's ship stood victorious, their weapons still smoking from the fierce battle. The crew of the Vanguard let out a collective sigh of relief. They had done it. They had defeated the Zardoc, for the first time. In a long time, humanity had a future. But as Harper looked out into space, he knew that the war was far from over. The Deathborn had helped them, but they had made it clear that they would not fight for free. What would they want in return? What price would humanity have to pay for its survival? The galaxy had been changed forever, and the journey ahead was uncertain. But one thing was clear: humanity had fought back. And now, the galaxy knew what it meant to challenge the power of Earth.